So here's the question. Can we be angry and not sin? Let's take a look at that.
You are watching the Beyond Sunday podcast.
So this is probably one of those universal things. We've all been angry at some point in time, whether it was frustration, irritation, or all the way to blinding rage. It is something we've all felt. And Scripture has so much to say about anger. Is anger in itself a sin, though? Well, throughout the Bible, we see God has anger towards people and their actions. Just a couple of quick examples for you. In 2 Kings chapter 17, we see God angry with the people of Israel and left them in the hands of their enemies. In Mark 3, we see Jesus become angry with religious leaders that were trying to trap him. So we see it is something that God himself, feels and experiences. We know that God does not sin, so it cannot be a sin in and of itself just to be angry. Anger is an emotion. They are a part of who we are. So I think our own anger isn't a sin in and of itself either. However, there are things to consider. Why are we angry, and what do we do with our anger? Now, James points this out clearly in James chapter 1 when he says that the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. God's anger is righteous, ours typically is not. When we allow anger to build within us and we act on it, it isn't the same as God's anger. His is born from a place of holiness, and ours is born from a different source. James tackles the source of our anger as well. In James chapter 4, he says that our quarrels and conflicts, which are born out of our anger, is from our emotions and our passions. It's our desires and the hurts that are within us that produce anger, not righteousness. King David explains in Psalm 37 where our anger leads. He says in verse 8 that anger leads only to evil. His son, King Solomon, says in Ecclesiastes 7:9 that anger is something that rests in the heart of fools. There is no wisdom in holding on to our anger, he's telling us. Jesus warns us not to be angry with one another in Matthew 5. He gives us several cautions that we will be guilty for any anger we have stored up or even spoken out against someone, not even taken physical action, but spoken out against someone. And there is more throughout Scripture about our anger. So while I don't think that just feelings of those first twinges of anger is sin, they are a temptation that can lead us into sinning in our anger. So how can we feel that moment of anger and still not sin? Well, let's start with some advice from King Solomon again. Proverbs 29. He tells us that a fool loses his temper and a wise man holds it back and even turns it away. We don't let anger have sway over us. We have to take those thoughts and feelings captive. In Proverbs 19:11, he tells us that we should overlook a transgression. So as we attempt to take our thoughts captive, we must bring them before God in prayer and, through his guidance, help us overlook those, to put them aside. Now, this can be hard to do. Our minds can become consumed with thoughts of unfairness, what is right, or even payback in some way, and trust me, I understand that. That's why the Apostle Paul advised us to never pay back evil for evil. It's a trap for us. It leads us straight to sin. In Romans chapter 12, he tells us to never take revenge, but always leave it up to God. It's not our place or ours to even worry about. The Lord will take care of all justice and vengeance. Paul also gives us this great word in Ephesians chapter 4, verses 26 through 27. He says this, he says, "Be angry and yet do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and do not give the devil an opportunity." He is showing that we can experience the moment of anger and still not sin. But he warns us that we can't let anger linger. When we do, the enemy has an opportunity to work in our hearts and minds and develop our hurt feelings into something sinful. I know I personally have experienced this too many times to count. I've been upset and went to sleep with those hurt feelings and frustrated thoughts. I have each and every time woken up, not with a fresh and forgiving perspective, but with a deeper frustration and an anger that has taken a deep and irrational root in my heart. And I appreciate these words from theologian Matthew Henry. It's just such a great quote. He says this, "Though anger in itself is not sinful, yet there is the utmost danger of it becoming so if it be not carefully watched and speedily suppressed. And therefore, though anger may come into the bosom of a wise man, it rests only in the bosom of fools." Anger should serve as a warning sign to each of us that we have something specific to take before God for Him to deal with in us and show us how to handle it. And for now, that's what I know.
This has been another episode of the Beyond Sunday podcast. And don't forget, like, share, and subscribe.